Hello everybody, I'm Crusader and welcome. I'm going to do a tier list of the CK2 DLCs because they haven't announced another one, there are no dev diaries. Maybe they've finished, I don't know, they may not have, but with CK2 coming up, now seems like a good time to do a tier list. So, we'll go through them in order of release and talk about whether they're good, whether they're bad, how they rank up against the others. We may shift things around as we go through, but we will see. If you disagree, which of course you're almost certain to, because the number of potential combinations here is, well, high. How many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16. So 16 to the power of 16 is the number of potential different combinations you could get. Nope, that's not true, because there's 3. Well, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of different combinations. But if you disagree, there is a link to this tier list in the comments section, and you can make your own list and share that. And we'll see how different people stack up. So will these DLCs earn Imperial Purple all the way down to the D tier? Got S, A, B, C, D. Tiering, good old Dark Souls scaling tiering as I think of it. So, first off, first DLC to come out was the Sword of Islam. Here it is. So, their images are a little cropped, by the way. Sorry about that. Sword of Islam, it's definitely not a very good DLC. It's quite fun. Being able to play as Muslims is obviously fun. The decadence mechanic is bad, and I don't like it. There's quite a lot of interesting stuff around commander traits that came in this one as well. I think it's a C tier DLC, to be honest. I do enjoy occasionally playing as Christians, but they just haven't received, sorry, as Muslims, but they haven't received the kind of love that Christianity has, especially later on down the line. So overall, I never ended up playing as Muslims that much. You know, I did one, you know, I've probably done like 3 full games. So it's just a little bit lower down, and it doesn't add very much beyond Islam, really, to be honest. That's a C tier DLC to me. One after that was Legacy of Rome. Now, Legacy of Rome is at least a B tier, maybe an A tier, because retinues are really cool. It's a fun additional mechanic. We're also, by the way, when I'm ranking these, I'm going to count the free features as part of the DLC when I'm ranking them. We're also ranking the free stuff at the same time. So, I mean, factions were introduced with Legacy of Rome. Like, can you imagine a CK2 without factions? That might make it an A tier. Oh yeah, and now I think about it, the Legacy of Rome was also the one that that introduced liege levies, which is a pretty freaking huge change and a good change. I think Legacy of Rome, it's an A tier. Factional stuff is really fun and interesting, especially as a vassal, of course. Lets you regulate your realm. Yeah, I think Legacy of Rome, that's an A tier DLC right there. Now, next one is easy. Sunset Invasion needs no discussion. It's crap. It adds almost nothing. Don't play it. So, next up, the Republic. Now, the Republic, I have to say, it's an A tier DLC. Playing as a Republic in CK2 is really good fun. You know, it's very, very different. It's a completely different style, you know, with trade posts and all that kind of stuff. I think there's not a huge amount to say beyond that. The Republic DLC, it's just good. It lets you play as, you know, a merchant, and you can have elections, and you can... what it does is it allows you to play as a vassal in an ongoing way, which is fun, because if you lose the election, you become a vassal again, and then you go back to being doge, etc., etc. And that's fun, because scheming and intriguing, not always from the top of the realm, is just an interesting divergence. Now, next up, the Old Gods. There is no question about where this goes. Raiding mechanics, playing as all the different pagan religions, having, like, they added in adventurers, which are not great, but they also added in rebels having people leading them and things, and they could become peasant leaders. They had, you know, conversion attempts against the Muslims, but raiding means that the Old Gods has to be an S tier DLC. My favourite times spent playing CK2 have definitely been either crusading or raiding, and this basically, to me, the Old Gods doubled the enjoyment of CK2, because it's really fun playing a Christian ruler, and it was okay, it was pretty good playing a Republic, but it's, you know, still kind of a Christian ruler. It's kind of fun playing as a Muslim, but then paganism being added in, oh baby, it adds so much. It's great stuff. Next, Sons of Abraham. Sons of Abraham is one of those interesting ones that didn't really add new people to play as. It did, because you can play as the Jews, which is fun, but only really fun for one campaign, because they're all the same. You know, you start in Axum, conquer Jerusalem. It's a good campaign, but it doesn't last that long. But let's start it in the B tier. I might bump it up. We are grading on a curve, by the way. I want to have a roughly equal number of DLCs in each of these, so we may move things around. I think it's pretty good. It adds a lot of interesting stuff. You get holy orders, you get factionalism within Islam, you get the Pope handing out money and the College of Cardinals and getting claims on stuff. It's pretty darn good, but without unlocking like a serious new person to play as, it's definitely, I think it's more of a B tier. Now next up, Rajas of India. Rajas of India is, to me, a D tier DLC. To me, and this is very much taste dependent, and of course this whole tier list is very much taste dependent, India is just not interesting. Not even slightly interesting. And I think that's probably because I haven't been educated about Indian history. And so playing there feels a lot less flavorful, because when you're playing in Europe, you know, speaking as a European, I've learned a lot about European history, and your mind kind of fills in that history in around the like in around what's happening. Like when you're playing as a Viking and you go and raid, you don't just see and experience what's happening on the screen. I'm also experiencing all my knowledge about the Lindisfarne raid, and never before has such a terror been seen on English shores, and, you know, the poems and the epics about that. And when you're crusading, you know history about the Crusades, and when you're fighting in the HRE, you know about the HRE. Whereas when I'm playing in India, it's just dull. It's like CK2 without any of the historical flavour. Of course, if you're Indian and you've learned a lot about medieval and early feudal Indian history, maybe it'll be much more interesting to you. But for me, it's a D tier DLC. I think I've never done a campaign that was longer than about an hour in India, ever. It just does not interest me. It doesn't really add anything to anyone else as well. Like, there's no interesting big features in Rajas that applies to other religions, except that it makes the whole game run slower because they added India. So, honestly, don't get the DLC, get a mod that removes India from the base game. Next up, Charlemagne. Now, Charlemagne is interesting because this was the first DLC that brought the bookmark back. It added in 769, which is nice because having lower technology and just a different starting map makes it interesting. Let me put it in C. It might go to B, but let's put it in C just for now. So you can also create dynamic kingdoms. That's fun. There's story events of Charlemagne, which I don't care about at all. CK2 is about emergent stories, not about the story just being told to me. They had some climate additions, and they overhauled regencies. I think it's a C tier. I do like playing in 769, don't get me wrong, but the absence of like the HRE and other stuff forming made it a bit less fun. It's not the first one to extend the timeline, of course. Old Gods did that, but Charlemagne is the second one. It wasn't a great DLC. I think it's a C tier. It's not a D tier because it adds some interesting stuff. A new bookmark is nice. But yeah, it's got to go there. Now, Way of Life. Way of Life, it might even be an S tier DLC because Way of Life added in loads of customization of your character. You could choose a focus. There was hundreds of new, not hundreds, but tons of new event chains to improve your character and go hunting and go feasting and all that kind of awesome stuff, which is fun and it's interesting and it adds a lot to the game, to the role-playing aspect especially. What else did it add? Oh yeah, it added duels and seduction and banishing to monasteries. It's a very good DLC. It's cemented in the S tier for sure. Next up's Horse Lords. Now, Horse Lords is one I'm going to be a little bit objective on because I didn't like it very much, but it's a good DLC. It adds a new and interesting way to play, just one that I haven't really engaged with that much. And so I think Horse Lords is a C tier, but it would be a D tier if it was purely my taste because I've just never played much as the Mongols or that kind of stuff. I've tried, I just really didn't get into it much. I'll try them again, but for now that's a C tier DLC. Next up, Conclave. Now, Conclave is divisive, but I'm going to bring the hammer down and say there is a correct answer. Conclave is a good DLC. Now, what Conclave does is it adds in dramatically more power for your vassals. It makes them able to vote on law changes in a more dynamic way, and it makes them constantly faction for increased influence and sway over the council. All kinds of things like that. Let me just take a drink here, sorry. Haven't recorded in a while, my voice is getting a bit sore. But we all push through. So Conclave, now the reason people don't like it is because it makes the game dramatically harder. It makes your vassals act against you constantly. But that's, for me, it's just another layer of gameplay, and a significant another layer of gameplay, which makes it really interesting. So that's an A tier DLC. Next up, the Reaper's Due. Now the Reaper's Due is a fantastic DLC. It's tough here. I think Legacy of Rome gets bumped down because it's getting crowded at the top. And these are definitely better than Legacy of Rome. I think Reaper's Due, it's not an S tier DLC. To be honest, it's not S tier. It's A tier. Now, it's nice, it's good, but it's not exceptional. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar, Reaper's Due adds in epidemics. That's the main thing it adds in. Epidemics, hospitals, prosperity, and depopulation, hiding yourself away in seclusion and being cannibalistic towards your courtiers. It's a really nice additional gameplay layer with the prosperity and depopulation. There's some interesting events, there's some cool stuff around immortality, there's the Black Death, lots of really interesting stuff added in Reaper's Due. I think it's an A tier DLC. It's not an S tier DLC because some of the features around sickness feel a little bit... Honestly, I think Reaper's Due is where CK2 started to show its age, because the only new features they can really add in much are all focused just around constant event chains. And by the time you get to Reaper's Due, I think that begins to wear on me as a player a little bit, because there's so many events in this game. Events rather than systems. If you look at EU4 or at Imperator even, or at Solaris, you can see that a lot of stuff is happening through systems rather than through events. And of course, systems are harder to dev in the later in the gameplay cycle, the game development cycle you are. So I think that's an A tier DLC. Next up was Monks and Mystics. Now, Monks and Mystics, it's pretty good. I'm going to give it a B tier because the societies are cool, but they're not great. You're not always very interested in them. But they are nice, they are interesting, they do add another persistent gameplay layer. I think that earns them a B tier. As you can see, all of the ones up here add persistent gameplay layers that affect most of your campaigns rather than just unlocking new ones like Rajas of India or Horse Lords. Now, next up was Jade Dragon. Jade Dragon, it's good. The fun stuff about interacting with China is interesting, but you don't do it all the time. Most of Europe can't do it. And I don't know, it doesn't quite add in a whole new gameplay layer. It's a little more of a side activity. So I think honestly, it's a C tier DLC for me, Jade Dragon. It's edging towards the B tier, but it's C tier. Interacting with China is fun, but since you can only do it as, a third? No, probably only a fifth of the actual interesting characters, aka ones on the Mediterranean or in Europe, Northern Europe, not Northeastern Europe. So, I mean, that might even be less than a fifth of the characters that can actually interact with it, because you can only interact with it if you're in either the Middle East, the Byzantines, or east of there. So, India, the steppe. Less interesting places to play, in my opinion. Next up, we have the final DLC, but before we get to that, let's address the Ruler Designer. I don't remember when the Ruler Designer was released, to be honest, but it's B. It's B tier. It's fun, it's nice to be able to design the Christo dynasty and set forth and carve your place in the world, not merely play as an individual. There's not a great deal to say beyond that. It doesn't affect the campaign beyond the start, but it's nice to be able to customize your dynasty. Very fun. Holy Fury. And holy crap, was it a good DLC. This is clearly an S tier DLC. There is no disputing that at all. This DLC added in enormous new stuff. The Pagans got extra stuff. The Crusades got extra stuff. There were new bloodlines. There's swaying, antagonizing, creating rivals dynamically as opposed to just through events, and going after them and dueling them. New succession laws, reforming pagan faiths in whole new, fun ways. This was an extremely good DLC, and you should definitely get it. So there is my tier list for CK2 DLC. I haven't included the EU4 save converter because as far as I know it's broken and has been for years, with on and off functionality working for some people, but I don't know. So that's not included, but this is my final tier list. Don't agree? Go ahead and post your own. The link to make your tier list is again in the description of the video. Thank you very much for watching, everybody, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.